Right off the bat, I would definitely make sure and know this term, the statute of frauds. And really, all you need to understand about the statute of frauds is that this right here: contracts need to be in writing. Okay? Contracts need to be in writing. And it says certain contracts, and what we're talking about there are real estate contracts. So real estate contracts need to be in writing in order to be enforceable. So if you can just connect the dots with the word writing and statute of frauds, you're going to be in good shape for that definition right there. Now, I've been talking about these two on my podcast, and if you're not listening or if you've not subscribed to my podcast, I would definitely encourage you to do that. We are on iTunes, Podbean, Spotify. You can listen to us on any of those platforms. And so you can listen to the same information I'm going over here, but I also add other short little podcasts that you can listen while you are in your car, you're out exercising, and hey, they're free, okay? That's always good, isn't it? Free. I should actually put some type of button on there where you can provide a love offering to me, but I don't do that. I want to help you pass the real estate test. I do have some products you can purchase over at Global Real Estate School, such as our digital flashcards and our practice exams, but the podcasts are free. And we've been talking about the bilateral and unilateral contracts. So here's the thing you can remember about the bilateral is each party promises to perform and act. Okay? And a unilateral contract, there's only one party that makes an obligation to perform. So you just, don't make these too difficult. You remember that if it's bilateral, it's going both ways, okay? Unilateral, there's only one direction for a contract, only one party. But under bilateral, each party's promising. Good example of a bilateral contract would be a listing agreement. I'll give you I think that as and a real estate sales contract is another example of a bilateral contract. I promise to give you this much money, and you promise to convey a deed or convey the property to me through the use of a deed. A unilateral contract's only one party's making a promise. Might be an option is a good example of a unilateral contract. Also reward, a contest. There's only one party making a promise. Now, on the real estate exam, keep note of this. They could ask you what type of a contract is a lease. It would be a bilateral contract, both directions, right? You promise to lease me quiet enjoyment. I promise to pay my rent. But a lease option or an option would be an example of a unilateral contract, because under an option, there's only one party that makes a promise, and that would be the seller. The seller has to sell if the buyer wants to buy. But so understand, option, unilateral, lease would be bilateral. But you could see some questions where they really get into wanting to know what type of contract. So you've got to make sure that you understand bilateral, both directions, both parties making promises. Unilateral, there's only one direction or one party that's making a promise. And then I have heard about these being on the exam before. An executed contract is done. Everything has been completed that's supposed to be completed, therefore it is called an executed contract. An executory contract, you need to understand that it has not yet been performed. See that? It could be subject to financing. It could be subject to a building inspection. It could be subject to the buyer's home closing. But it is still in what we call an executory state. So do not make this too challenging on the test. You get a question, you read it. They want to know, is it executory or executed? If there's anything that still needs to be performed or follow or finished, it's executory. Otherwise, if they word everything in the problem and you're reading that question and you say, well, there's nothing else that has to be done. It's complete. It's executed. Okay, not too difficult. Sometimes we make the questions a little bit too challenging. We talk about offer and acceptance in the contract chapter. There just needs to be some type of an intention to enter into an agreement, an offer, and then there has to be an acceptance by the offeree of all the terms of the offer. At that point, a valid contract has been created. We talk about consideration. I'm going to drop past that and just really get into novation. Novation is the substitution of a new obligation for an owed one. Substitution of new parties to an existing obligation, as when the parties to an agreement accept a new debtor in place of an owed one. What you need to realize with novation is that, let's just say that I have a loan on my property. I'm in some challenging situation and you want to take over my loan with all the same terms. And the bank doesn't want to foreclose on me because they're going to be out a lot of money. So we go to the bank and I say, look, would you allow you to take over my loan? Can we do a novation and just substitute you as the new borrower? And the bank may go along with that and say, sure. So you're going to enter into that with the bank. And so novation would be just substituting a new contract for an old one. You could also maybe go to the bank and say, hey, I've got a line of credit and you're providing me $30,000. I'd like to have a $45,000 line of credit. And the bank says, okay, well, we can do a $45,000 line of credit, but we're going to have to change the interest rate on your line of credit. And I say, that's fine. So that new contract would, under novation, you can see that there, it's the substitution of a new obligation for an old one, or substitution of new parties to an existing obligation, as I mentioned to you with my scenario. So that is novation. And then let's drop down to subrogation. Subrogation. What is subrogation? Subrogation is the substitution of a third person in place of a creditor to whose rights the third person succeeds in relation to the debt. Now, don't let that confuse you. Write this down or put this in your memory bank. Subrogation, it's kind of interesting because we have subordination and subrogation. Subrogation, I'm going to take another drink of water. Sometimes when I have these lights in front of me, it gets a little warm down here in my studio. So my apologies for that. But subrogation, you see in insurance policies. If you wreck your car, let's say you have a car wreck and your car's totaled and it was not your fault, your insurance company is going to pay you off, even though it wasn't your fault. So you collect a check from your insurance company. You can go on and buy a new car. In the terms of your insurance policy, there's a subrogation policy which says if the insurance company pays you off for any kind of accident, you allow them to be substituted as you to go and sue the other party to try to get their money back. So subrogation is just the substitution of a third party. A lot of times title insurance companies have that. So if they have to pay you a claim, you get paid. You can go on your merry way and do whatever you want, but the title company may want to go back and try to sue someone if there was negligence in someone forging a signature or doing whatever. You allow them to be substituted into your shoes so they can go sue the other party and get their money back. I know that sounds like a lot, but just remember, subrogation, substitution of a third party. Try to put the insurance perspective in there where the insurance company can go and try to get their money back. Okay, and I give you an example as well here. For instance, a title company that pays a loss within the scope of its policy is subrogated into a claim that the buyer has against the seller for a loss. And insurance policies are normally where you find that. I'm not going to talk about vendor and vendee because we'll talk about that when we get into financing a little bit later, but I do want you to make sure you understand statute of frauds in real estate contracts in writing. Bilateral, each party promises. Unilateral, one party promises. Make sure you understand executed contract, fully performed. Executory, not yet performed, something still missing. And then novation, we talked about substitution of a new obligation or a new party to an existing obligation. And then subrogation, we just wrapped up. 12 minutes and 41 seconds, a good time period for a YouTube video. As always, I want to say thank you so much for watching. Be sure and subscribe to our channel, and also go over to globalrealestateschool.com. Check out some of our resources there, and find us on Facebook, Instagram. We'd love for you to follow us, and we'd love to help you provide information to help you pass the real estate exam on the first attempt. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.